It was early fall when my friend Jake and I decided to take one last camping trip before winter settled in. Our small town didn't offer much in terms of entertainment, and with nothing better to do, we often found ourselves venturing into the dense forests that surrounded us. This time, Jake suggested a new spot, a place a friend had mentioned, supposedly secluded with an incredible view of a lake. Sounded perfect. The drive was short, no more than 15 minutes from the outskirts of town. We parked on the side of the road, just as Jake's friend had instructed, and found the faint outline of a narrow trail leading into the woods. The path was barely visible, overgrown with brush, as if no one had walked it in years. That should have been our first warning. After nearly an hour of trekking through uneven terrain, we finally reached the clearing. But instead of a picturesque lake, we found something far less inviting. The lake was nothing more than a murky, overgrown pond, its surface coated in a thick layer of algae. The air was heavy with an earthy, stagnant smell. I shot Jake a look, and he shrugged, forcing a laugh. Maybe it was nice a few years ago, he offered. We decided to make the best of it. The clearing was still a decent campsite, with plenty of space and a natural barrier of trees providing some sense of security. We set up our tents on a small hill overlooking the pond and spent the afternoon gathering firewood and talking about nothing in particular. The usual stuff. Every so often, I'd glance toward the other side of the pond, where a lone, abandoned tent sat among the trees. It looked weathered, its fabric faded and sagging, as if it had been there for weeks. Then I saw him. The air around me turned deathly still, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. A sudden, sharp chill crawled up my spine, raising goosebumps along my arms. The faint, metallic scent of damp earth mixed with something else, something sour and decayed, filled my nostrils, making my stomach twist. A towering silhouette, unnaturally still, his head tilted at an unsettling angle as if he were listening to something I couldn't hear. A figure stood at the edge of the water, directly across from us. He was motionless, just watching. I felt an immediate chill crawl up my spine. I nudged Jake, who followed my gaze. "Think that's the guy who owns the tent?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Jake squinted. "Probably. Maybe he's just checking us out, making sure we're not messing with his stuff." I lifted a hand in a small, friendly wave. The figure didn't respond. Instead, he remained frozen, his shadow stretching unnaturally long over the water, as though something unseen was pulling it toward us. After a few more seconds, he turned and disappeared into the trees. For the rest of the afternoon, we kept an eye out, but we never saw him again. It was strange, but we brushed it off. As night fell, we lit a fire and tried to shake off the lingering unease. We played cards, cracked jokes, anything to distract ourselves. For a while, it worked. Then Jake froze mid-laugh, his eyes locked onto something behind me. My stomach dropped. I turned slowly. Just beyond the reach of the firelight, a shadowy figure stood in the darkness, watching us. I swallowed hard. "Hey, man, you okay?" Jake called out. The figure didn't move. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. Something about the way he stood there, silent, completely still, it wasn't right. Then, without warning, he turned and walked away, his movements stiff, almost mechanical. As he disappeared into the trees, I swore I heard a faint whispering, not in any language I recognized, but layered, like multiple voices speaking at once. We exchanged uneasy glances, but neither of us wanted to admit how freaked out we were. We convinced ourselves it was just some random guy, maybe the owner of the abandoned tent, curious about us but ultimately harmless. Still, sleep didn't come easy that night. Every rustling leaf, every crack of a branch sent my nerves into overdrive. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to Jake frantically unzipping my tent. His face was pale, his breathing ragged. "Dude, he whispered, voice trembling. Someone was just outside my tent. I shot up, my mind racing. You sure? He nodded, swallowing hard. I woke up and saw a shadow moving. When I sat up, they took off. We sat in tense silence, listening, but the forest was eerily quiet. We had two choices: stay put and hope whoever it was didn't come back, or pack up and make the trek back to the car in total darkness. The forest was unnervingly silent, the usual nighttime symphony of chirping crickets and rustling leaves absent, replaced by an oppressive stillness. The wind barely stirred the trees, and each step we took on the damp forest floor felt deafeningly loud, as if something unseen was holding its breath, waiting for us to make a move. But the air around us had changed. It felt charged, heavy, as if we were being watched by more than just human eyes. We chose the fire. We stoked the flames high, our bags already packed in case we needed to run. We stayed up, backs to the fire, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. The night stretched on, each second dragging slower than the last. Then, just as the first hint of dawn bled into the sky, we saw it. The figure stood at the edge of the pond again, half hidden in the mist, watching us. But this time, he wasn't alone. Two more figures emerged from the tree line, standing silently beside him. Neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. Then, all at once, they turned and slipped into the trees, vanishing like ghosts. The moment the sun was high enough, we bolted, practically sprinting back to the car. When we finally reached it, we jumped inside, locked the doors, and sat there, panting, staring at the forest as if expecting something to follow us out. Later that day, we reported it to the police. We didn't expect much, but we felt like we had to warn someone. The call we got back chilled me to my core. The abandoned tent? It belonged to a missing person, someone who had vanished over a month ago. When authorities searched it, they found an old notebook inside, its pages warped with moisture. The writings were frantic, barely legible scrawls repeating eerie warnings: don't let them see you sleep. Don't answer when they call your name. A single shoe lay just outside the tent, its laces torn, and long scratches marred the fabric of the entrance, as if something or someone had tried to claw its way in, or out. The strange part? When authorities searched the tent, they found an old notebook filled with frantic scribblings, pages scrawled with the words, "Don't let them see you sleep. Don't answer when they call your name." And the figures we saw. They were never found. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened if Jake hadn't woken up. If we hadn't seen them. If we had stayed just one night longer. I don't think we would have made it back.